All right, let's get right into it. Welcome back to another Explainer, where we take complex academic and psychological frameworks and we break them down so you can truly understand what's going on under the hood. Today, we are unpacking some absolutely fascinating insights on abnormal psychology and modern life. We're going to explore this overarching theme of mental tension, how it actively shapes human behavior, and exactly how the science of psychology categorizes and defines the fragmented mind.
Look, mental tension is, without a doubt, a universal modern struggle. Honestly, despite all of our amazing economic, scientific, and political advancements, humanity is still suffering under this immense, invisible weight. And you might be wondering, why? Well, there are deep societal drivers at play here. We're talking about war, disease, corruption, crime, and profound inner conflict. These external and internal pressures, they create an immense mental strain that forms the absolute foundation of what we're going to be looking at today.
So, here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. The stress of modern life. 2. Defining abnormal psychology. 3. The internal disconnect. And 4. The social disconnect.
Section 1. The stress of modern life and how we navigate the modern condition.
Okay, so when that daily stress hits hard, how do we cope? Many people turn towards some pretty detrimental mechanisms just to catch a break and feel relaxed. Things like taking tranquilizers, smoking marijuana, using LSD, or drinking alcohol. But rather than actually curing the tension, our sources warn that these substances just create a severe, vicious cycle of dependency, disease, and major financial drain. An individual literally becomes a slave to the urge to consume them over and over again, which ultimately leads to entirely wrong mental attitudes.
But hey, what's the alternative, right? Well, a highly practical, totally natural solution to combat this nervous strain is to practice yoga and meditation daily. And the really encouraging news here is that you don't need hours and hours to do this. Even a short daily practice is enough to begin recentering the mind and pulling it away from those damaging coping mechanisms.
Moving right along to Section 2, Defining Abnormal Psychology, from Context to Concept.
Let's actually pin down what this field is. Abnormal psychology is a highly specific branch of psychology and a behavioral science. It's both a theoretical and a practical science. And what does it focus on? Well, it studies deviated personalities and different types of behavior disorders. This ranges from, say, a frustrated child who suddenly refuses to play games and just starts sucking their thumb, all the way to a housewife clouded by constant anxiety who becomes obsessively absorbed in cleaning her house over and over again.
To really give this some true academic weight, let's look at a direct textbook quote. It states, "Abnormal psychology is the field of psychology which specializes in the development and integration of psychological principles for the understanding of abnormal behavior." Basically, this tells us that the field isn't just about casually observing oddities, it's about systematically applying established principles to make sense of actions that would otherwise seem completely baffling.
Which brings us to a huge, vital question, one that's going to guide the rest of our explainer. We know the definition of the field now, sure, but what exactly does abnormal behavior look like in practice? Like, how can we actually identify it?
That takes us to Section 3, the internal disconnect. Struggles within the mind.
Okay, the absolutely crucial thing to grasp here is understanding what happens inside the mind first. Abnormal behavior manifests internally through deeply disjointed cognition. These individuals are mentally unbalanced. Their thoughts are highly irrational. They'll plan one thing, immediately think of another, and then behave in a way that's completely upside down from what they just planned out. Their personality essentially becomes fragmented and uncoordinated. And because of this internal chaos, they suffer from extreme hypersensitivity, getting severely agitated over the smallest things. Ultimately, this leads to an intense, persistent feeling of insecurity. They're left in a constant, fearful mood, feeling entirely unprotected by the world around them. Now, this next point brilliantly highlights a core internal struggle, emotional immaturity. Consider this contrast for a second. If a young child throws a tantrum and insists on getting chocolate before going to school, well, that's a pretty normal, age-appropriate reaction. However, if a young adult insists on getting a motorcycle before going to college and reacts by crying and deliberately skipping meals to demand it, that is a wildly misaligned reaction. And that is the very essence of abnormal emotional immaturity.
And you know, this internal broken dial goes even further. Individuals with abnormal personalities literally cannot control the expression of their emotions. They completely fail to align them with their age, their gender, their status, or even the physical environment they're in.
For example, they might behave incredibly strangely by laughing uncontrollably at a tragic event like a funeral, or crying hysterically at a joyous occasion like a wedding.
All right, Section 4. The social disconnect, clashing with the outside world.
When we shift our focus to external behavioral traits, we see a picture of severe social friction. Because these individuals simply cannot harmonize with family or friends, they experience what's called inadequate adjustment. And that leads to frequent, entirely unnecessary conflicts. This often degrades into outright antisocial behavior, where basic social norms are just violated. They tend to be deeply selfish rather than cooperative, engaging in acts ranging from stealing to outright violence. And perhaps most chillingly, they exhibit a total lack of remorse or repentance for the wrongdoings they commit.
So how does this build into their actions? And honestly, why is there no remorse? Well, it all comes down to a crucial mechanic, a complete lack of intuition. Because they're missing this internal moral compass, they simply have no working knowledge of what is good versus bad, or moral versus immoral. They don't care about social restrictions at all. Instead, they act purely on sudden, unorganized impulses. The very second an idea pops into their mind, they act on it, without a single moment of hesitation.
This whole tragic disconnect is summed up perfectly right here. The source notes: they can't evaluate themselves. They are not aware of their strength limitations. Hence, they are the victims of criticism. Because they suffer from a fundamental lack of self-esteem and self-knowledge, they are completely counter-adjusted. They genuinely do not understand why society rejects and criticizes them, which naturally leads them to withdraw even further into suspicion and isolation.
And wow, that brings us to the end of our explainer today, leaving us with a really critical, profound question to ponder. We've just seen how mental tension can absolutely shatter a personality, leaving a person without an internal compass or any hope of social harmony. So, how can society better manage and support individuals whose fragmented personalities leave them completely without the protection, emotional maturity, and personal insight to actually help themselves? It's a massive, complex challenge for sure. But understanding the deep roots of abnormal behavior, exactly as we've done today, is the very first step. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.